Hello, welcome. Today's video is going to answer a very simple question that has a bit more of a complicated answer than people think. When should you start building mills? Because there's more to building mills than factory count. What you need to consider is your total factory output. How much equipment are you going to get? Because you could have 10 less mills, but if you had them for 2 years longer, you're going to have more factory output for right now. So the question is, when should you start building mills? Obviously, the earlier you build them, the more you're going to have for the start of the war, but you want some sort of balance between having enough equipment at the beginning of the war and then still scaling as the war goes on. A lot of experienced players think they know the answer to this question, but I think the answer might surprise them. We're going to test out three scenarios. Building mills 2.5 years before the war. I'm defining the war as January 1st, 1940. Building to that date. How much production are you going to have from building mills July 37, so 2.5 years before the war, January 1st, 1938, so 2 years, and then June to July 38 to the beginning of the war. So basically an anti-civ greed, a normal build, and a civ greed. How are those production outputs going to look when the war starts and then as the war progresses? I have 6 months later, 12 months later, and 24 months later. First, I'll show you the basic setup we're going to do. I'm going to take all of the divisions, delete them. I'm going to take the planes, I'm going to delete those don't matter. We're just going to try and track total output. We're going to delete our starting stockpile. Those are worthless. We're going to delete everything in production, and we're going to put everything on infantry equipment. Infantry equipment 1 costs 0.5 IC. So whatever number of infantry equipment we end up with, multiply that by 0.5, that's our total production output to that time. And we're going to do 3 different builds. All of them are going to start off the same. I'm going to build infrastructure in these 3 states because they have a lot of slots and I'm on civilian economy, so it's worthwhile. And then I'm going to build civs. And I'm going to stop building civs July 37, January 1st, 38, June-ish 38. And what I'm going to do is when we get to that point, I'm just going to make sure we're building only the last one, whatever we have construction towards. If we don't have construction towards it, get rid of it. For the UK, I'm going to do a pretty standard build. I'm only going to go to partial mob though, because the UK gets 2 bonuses. British austerity here, and then later on, you get prepare for the inevitable. 5% factory output, okay, who cares? But military factory construction speed. So with that focus, and with the general rearmament focus, the UK acts like it's on war economy when it's on partial mob. So I'm going to just stick there. And I made split off points. So the first year and a half is going to go the same for all of them, because I only did it once. The first 2 years is going to go the same for the split off for 2 years at a time and 1.5 years ahead of time because I only did them once. So let's find them. Okay, so this is 1.5 years ahead of time, and this is the civ greed build. And I'm going to show you the problem with civ greeding. Despite the fact that I am hard rushing dispersed, I am largely out of slots in the UK because they're all being taken up by civs. And don't worry, I've been keeping track of the numbers below, and I've been trading away civs to make sure that that is consistent. And I did stay on export focus, simply because if I didn't, I would have run out of steel, and I didn't feel like simulating trade packs because you do actually lose civs from trade packs, but by and large, it's not that bad. So what I've done is just taking our infantry equipment, and I haven't swapped off. As I got better infantry equipment, I've just taken this amount. Now, this is 14 days late, but I did take the amount from January 1st, 1940. I just forgot to make the save. I should have reloaded the autosave and saved that, but I didn't for some reason. But otherwise, I haven't been doing things outside the ordinary, other than hard rushing your industry techs, but even then, that's kind of normal. I used the bonuses for the 1941 techs, the 2 you get here. So that's what I've done. I've gone all the way through to 1942, and that creates these charts. And that popped up on the wrong screen. These charts. Let's just zoom out a little bit. So we've got the anti-civ greed, normal, civ greed. They don't catch up. This is the relative. 2 years after the start of the war, civ greeding has not caught up. Hell, you barely have more mills. Normal isn't too far behind, and it's still ahead of civ greeding, but it's still behind the anti-civ greed option. You know, we're looking at 59 civs versus 68 versus 81. In the anti-civ greed option, as we go across the top, it's ahead in mills, tied for first in mills, slightly behind. We're 2 mills behind, and then here by this point we are 8 mills behind. But our main problem here is if we load the civ greed save, we're running out of good building slots to build it. All of these good building slots are filled. We'd have to convert. I mean, I did just finish Dispersed 5. I made sure we did the tech the same. We had the same bonuses all the way through. But for the most part, I've been having to build out in the middle of nowhere. Sorry, this is the anti-civ greed. For the anti-civ greed, I've actually been able to build largely in the UK. I'm not out of slots. If we swap over to the Civ Grid, we'll find I do still have some slots available here because I just got the 1943 tech, but I've been having to build out here in these 40% slots. And over here, Caribbean, in these 40% slots. So even though I have more civs, because I'm having to build in slots that don't have good infrastructure, I'm actually losing out. So that creates this really interesting phenomenon where anti-civ greeting, building 2.5 years before war, you're just ahead the entire time. But I had an idea. Maybe that's because I just never swapped my production. I just stuck on infantry equipment 1. So I did it again with Germany. I only went to December 1939. And this is the civ greed option. We're running into the same problem as with the UK. I'm out of slots. All of these will finish within a month. I've been hard rushing dispersed with a tech juggle, and I'm going to actually run out of building slots temporarily. And then I'm going to quickly fill those, and it's going to be 700 days before I can get more, which means I'm going to have to convert factories. Also, at this point, I'm behind on mills because I did also track these results. The anti-civ greed option, even though I only had 89 civs, and that's not even what I built to, that's with Austria and the Czech civs, I have 176 mills. Now, I've built no refineries, obviously, so there is a little bit there. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to get this many here if you'd built refineries, but you can clearly see that civ greeting, I'm really far behind. That's 100,000 production behind. If we just do this number divided by that one, 25% less production by the end of 1939. And I don't really have the ability to catch up because I've used all my slots. If we go to the anti-civ greed option here, I still have a good amount of time for dispersed to come in, and then I'll have a ton more slots, and I'll probably be able to get to dispersed 5 before I run out of slots. All the while, I switched to infantry equipment 2 in this one, and I'm taking that into consideration in this chart. I am not only outproducing them significantly on infantry equipment 1, I'm significantly outproducing them on infantry equipment 2. I had 30,000 more infantry equipment in the anti-civ greed option than versus normal, and that number is almost 70,000 between the civ greed and the anti-civ greed option. That's over 25,000 IC of relevant IC. That's a big issue. That's one of the reasons why you're supposed to delay building mills. Sort of. I mean, because what's the use of mills if you don't have anything to produce, right? Well, I mean, it means you can start producing it the second you have it. Now, there's one thing to take into consideration here. I'm not actually having to trade anything. This, I think, needs to update because I did not have... Yeah, there we go. That just needed to update. I think it wasn't taking into consideration excavation tech. That might need 1 tick, but there's no trade needed here. So I would say in single player, I would go for a normal build. The extra 15 or so civs will be useful in your trading because you're not going to get trade backs. In multiplayer, you're going to get trade backs, which means if you do 10 civs each, you're going to get 8 back because the trade back is subject to consumer goods. So you're going to get most of it back. So I would never recommend civ greeting in multiplayer. I wouldn't recommend civ greeting in single player either, but I would recommend more going towards the normal and single player so you can still afford your trade, but where you're going to get trade backs, don't even bother. Build mills early and often because this is the relative number to civ greeting. I have 34% more production output compared to civ greeting. And as we can see from the British example, yeah, that gets closer, but it's still 110% after 2 years. And when you civ greed, you're really likely to run out of slots, and it's not efficient to convert civs to mills. It would have been better to have just never built the civ and just built the mills outright. Anyways, remember, mill count is not everything. Production efficiency cap is very important, and the length of time you've had those mills is very important, which does play into production efficiency cap. So build some civs. Don't get me wrong, don't just start building mills. You won't have any construction capability whatsoever, but build some civs and then start building mills earlier than you think. Because 2.5 years before the war, this is July of 37 for the UK, and that's a massive production difference. 35% at the outbreak of the war. After a year, you're still 20% up, and then even a year later, you're still 10% up. So build mills early and often. Do not wait until you're about to go to war to build mills. Start building them about 2 for single player, 2.5 for multiplayer. So if you're the Soviets, you need to be building mills by the end of 38. Everyone else, same goes for the US. Because they're entering the war late, they'll have time to catch up. They also have a large number of slots. They're unlikely to run out. Everyone else, you should be probably building close to July to September 37. Unless you're going for a really early war, in which case, don't even bother building civs. You're going to conquer your civs. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.